Learning objective 4, we are going to look closer at what's going to shift demand. So ultimately, we're going to put all this together and have demand and supply. It's going to tell me the price of various goods and services and how those things could change depending on different events that happen. So the first step is to understand demand, what shifts demand. Eventually, we'll get to supply and what shifts supply, and then we'll have a pretty good working model of different parts of the economy. So factors shifting demand. Well, first is kind of redraw out what is a shift versus what's a movement along the curve. Now, there's a link here for a graph. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the end of the slides. There's actually a much nicer picture than the one I'm going to draw probably. So that will be a good reference after the fact here. So shifts in the curve. So here's my quantity and price. And here's my demand curve. I'm going to call this D1. So a shift in the curve means that at any price, the quantity demanded changes, or at every price, the quantity demanded changes. So let me just switch colors here. We'll go to green. So an increase in demand means that at every price, I want more of that thing. That's an increase in demand. So we'll call that D2. So we call this a shift right, or an increase in demand. The curve is completely shifted. At every price, the quantity demanded has gone up. Very analogously, a decrease in demand, I'll draw that in red, means that at every price, the quantity demanded has decreased. Call that D3 here. This is a shift left, or a decrease in demand. And remember, when I use the word demand, I'm referring to the whole curve. And so a decrease in demand means the entire curve has shifted left. Increase in demand means the entire curve has shifted right. That is distinct from when I'm simply moving along the curve. So a movement along the curve, my quantity and price, my demand curve, would be the result of a change in the price. So quantity demanded when the price is 5 versus the quantity demanded when the price is 4. This is moving along the curve. The shifts in the curve are the changes in demand. Okay, with that kind of terminology and visuals out of the way, let's try to figure out what exactly would cause demand to shift. Now I've got a little exercise here that you can kind of try. If you pause the video and just kind of write down for yourself how you think each of these changes would affect the demand curve. Would it cause a shift to the right, a shift to the left? What exactly would happen? Now, again, it's important to try these on your own because it's really in making, I don't want to call it a mistake, but in guessing one way or thinking one way and then you learn it's slightly different, that's really how you learn the material the best. So really pause this, write down whether you think this is a shift to the right or left in the demand for Snickers bars. Let's kind of walk through some of these things and we'll come back to those and understand whether it's a shift to the right or the left. Tastes and preferences is one of the big components of demand. So remember, demand came from our willingness to pay, which was related very strongly to our marginal benefit of consuming one more of that good. So what is the benefit to me of consuming a Snickers bar? Well, that depends on my taste or preference for Snickers bars. If I learn, as we did back here, that sugar is bad for you, well, that's going to affect my preferences to eat Snickers. So sugar bad, then I would have less benefit from eating Snickers. And I would expect then that demand for Snickers will decrease. Or shift to the left. All right, so shift left if sugar bad. Now, these types of things happen all the time. So if you happen to go and buy a bag of Swedish fish, so little candy, the little red fish, right? You'll notice if you look closely on the package, there's something that says a fat-free food, which in fact Swedish fish are a fat-free food. Now, why would they say that? Well, back when I was a kid, it wasn't that sugar was bad for you, it was that fat was bad for you. That was the sort of dietary evil. So consuming fat would lead to heart disease was the train of thought. And so anything that was fat-free was thought of as good. So you saw things such as Swedish fish being labeled as a fat-free food. Snickers would have, it does potentially have some fat in it, so it wouldn't be fat-free. But if I was in the, 1980s, demand for Swedish fish would be relatively high. It's fat-free. Today, as preferences have changed, demand for Swedish fish has shifted to the left. So whether we find something appealing or not is a huge component of demand. And as those tastes and preferences change, demand is going to shift to the right or left. And we'll see eventually how that affects the prices for these goods. Okay. So up next will be income and wealth. I'll come back and treat that in a separate video so that we can go into some more of the details.